So the first thing that I decided to do was try to have a protest, because that's what activists do, right? We protest. So I got a bunch of people together, I got some signs together that said stop arresting medical marijuana patients. Most of the activists were my age. And we went out to Rob Simmons' office, had this big rally out there. He actually came out and spoke with us. And he said, okay, well, you know, I don't agree with you, but you know, if you send me some info, I'll look it over. And we thought that was a victory because we actually got him to talk with us about the issue. So we send him the information, weeks go by, I call, nothing. He keeps stalling, you know, as his aides tell me, he's still looking at the information, hasn't made up his mind yet. So I call back Aaron and you know, start troubleshooting with him about this, and I'm like, okay, you know, what do I do here? There's this guy, he's a Republican, you know, really conservative, he doesn't agree with this. We protested, he said he's going to look at the information, he's stalling on me. And Aaron brought up the good point that it was election season, and he was running up against a you know, very difficult Democratic opponent. Polling was very close. George Bush was getting very unpopular at that time, so Republicans were getting very unpopular at that time. So really all I needed to do was, and also we had the public support of the majority of the state of Connecticut on this issue. So all I needed to do was exercise that leverage of making sure that he knew that if he voted against this, he would lose votes, and that was my job. I wish I could come up, I could take credit for this, but Aaron came up with the great idea of going to all the, it was around the 4th of July, and going to all of the 4th of July parades that he was going to go to, right? So politicians go to these things, they walk around, they shake hands, they kiss babies, right? And so what I did was I printed out a bunch of flyers that said, Congressman Simmons thinks that AIDS, cancer, and MS patients should go to federal prison. And I positioned myself about 10 steps ahead of Rob Simmons, who was in the front of the parade. So I was the front of the parade. And I'm walking along, hi, how you doing? Putting, these flyers in every, old lady's hand, young person's hand, single mom, families, getting these flyers out there and looking back. And Rob Simmons is walking there, trying to shake hands, and every hand he's trying to shake, somebody's going, yelling at him. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but they were clearly pissed off. They're looking down at the flyer, looking up at him, and he's like bewildered, as to how all these people know his stance about medical marijuana. Of course, then he looks up and sees who's handing out all these flyers, and of course it's me. So 4 or 5 of these parades later, it's the 4th of July. It's the last parade, and I go up to him after the parade, and he doesn't recognize me at first because I have like sunglasses on. I take them off, and he like takes a step back, and he's like, "You're the asshole that's been spreading all that bullshit about me." And I just kind of shrugged, and I said, "Look, I'm just informing the voters about your stance on the issue, and if your stance changes, I go away." The vote happened a week later, and he changed his vote. So I don't tell that story to brag, maybe a little bit, but what I really tell that story to illustrate is that at the very beginning, when I was having this protest and not really making much progress, it's because I hadn't really gained a full grasp of what it takes to exercise that leverage. And once I really thought out the steps. Okay, the goal is to get him to vote the right way on this. The strategy is not to convince him, because he's unconvincible. He was kind of an asshole. The strategy is to pressure him into feeling forced to do this, or else he's going to lose the election. And then the tactics came naturally from there. So I implore you, if you're running a campaign either at the local level to change campus policy or at the state level, to really think it through and think about what kind of leverage you can exercise on the decision makers, and of course figure out who those decision makers are. Because if you're going in front of your, your student government and trying to pass a resolution through the student government, but they really have no power, and you haven't gone and actually spoken with the dean of students, who has the power to change the policy, then you might kind of be spinning your wheels. And we've learned this the hard way with a lot of our campaigns. I remember a few years ago, the University of Maine called me up in Farmington, and they said same thing. They said, we have this petition written up, we have some letters to the editor that we want to send out, and I asked the chapter leader if he had actually gone and spoken with the dean of students, and he said, no, well, they probably won't be supportive, but maybe I'll try it out. And they went, and in one conversation, they changed the policy overnight. So they saved themselves this huge, long campaign that they thought that they would have to wage by just, taking a second to figure out who the decision makers are. The same kind of thing happened in Rhode Island with medical marijuana. Is Jesse still in there? Jesse. So yeah, Jesse and Tom and Nathaniel, a bunch of the Rhode Island guys who put together that campaign. One of the first big setbacks that happened to us in Rhode Island, I stepped out of the room, so I don't know if you talked about this, Jesse, but one of the first big setbacks was this article in the Providence Phoenix. You guys remember that? Our article in the Providence Phoenix comes out, says that there's this movement to legalize medical marijuana in Rhode Island, and it's talking about how this is being pushed primarily by college students. And the last line of the article said something like, college students for pot, who would have guessed? So it totally just dismissed our cause. And the Providence Phoenix is a really progressive weekly newspaper in Rhode Island, so we thought that they'd be on our side. But ultimately they dismissed this as just a bunch of college students trying to legalize pot so we could get high. So what we realized after that article came out is that we needed to really put these organizations like the Rhode Island Nurses Association and these prominent organizations and patients in the front of the movement and step back out of the limelight as students and kind of be the guys behind the curtain, so to speak. So that's another thing to think about, is that sometimes when you're a skinny white dude with a beard and you're lobbying for medical marijuana, or you're lobbying for changes in crack powder sentencing disparity, it's good to look for the people who are going to be the best spokespeople for those issues and step out of the limelight yourself. Good activists don't always need to be the spokesperson of the campaign. To tell you the truth, if you have long nappy dreadlocks and you like to wear tie-dyes, that's awesome. But maybe you're not the best person to be going on the evening news to talk about marijuana legalization. I cut my hair. I used to have hair down to here and wear tie-dyes all the time. So speaking to my brethren here, no offense. So yeah, thinking about who the best spokespeople are and that kind of thing ahead of time. Another example is here in Massachusetts. Who was involved in the campaign to decriminalize Massachusetts here? Jimmy D was the only person? Come on, anybody else? Did anyone vote for it? Okay. So, as you may or may not know, the campaign here to decriminalize marijuana in Massachusetts, it passed by a landslide. But throughout the whole campaign, it was really close. I mean, we were, people in the movement were at the edge of our seats on this thing. The polling was in the 50 percentile. It was just really down to the wire, and we were getting a lot of opposition from law enforcement. So I wasn't, really involved in the strategy sessions, but what I imagine happened is, the people who were running the campaign, the Marijuana Policy Project, Committee for Sensible Marijuana Policy, Cann, people who were behind this, and SSDP, of course, in Massachusetts, sat down and realized, okay, well, we're down to the wire, and we've been using every argument. We've been using the economic argument, we've been using the civil rights argument, this is tying up police resources argument, but we don't seem to be making really any headway in moving these poll numbers. But what is the thing that we haven't been trying out yet? So they took a good look, and they looked at their opposition, and what their opposition was doing was bringing in law enforcement and police to talk against the initiative. And you know, when you're an activist, you know, a lot of times you kind of overthink things, and you think, well, you know, the public is smart, and they can get the economic arguments if we just make enough of them, or they can get this and they can get that. But really, I think a lot of people are humble in that they realize that, you know, they work a long job, they don't know much about these issues, and they look for leadership on these issues from people that matter, right? I mean, my parents tell me this all the time. You know, I debate drug policy with my parents, and they tell me, well, you know what, we don't know about this. We haven't read all the books, we haven't listened to both sides, so we just need to look at people who we respect and see, you know, where they're coming